Crystal Charter, Daughter of the Red Seal. Read and written by Rebecca Sewell. Chapter 19. Riding an unfamiliar ship home alone had felt like an unjustifiable form of torture. Imprisoned aboard a strange and uncomfortable vessel, with nothing but vast, calm water around her. That sense of freedom from a few days prior, now separating her from the one place that she wanted to be. Maebe was given a tiny cabin, with 2 stacked bunks and enough space to turn in a circle if she pinned her arms in. Not even a window to offer her a slice of light. She had banned the other inhabitant of the cabin, cursing and raging until the captain had asked her first mate to spend a few days in a hammock below decks. They weren't hauling much merchandise, so Maebe couldn't see the problem. Captain Hark had collected Maebe from Clest with the most modest ship in the Red Seal fleet, the Sylph's Tale. It was the smallest but fastest of the merchant ships that her family owned, often used for last-minute purchases of medicine from the more treacherous villages in the north of the Main. The Sylph's Tale had been bound for Clest with the remainder of non-essential borderlines that the Emoto couldn't carry. But the crew hadn't had a chance to load everything before they were instructed to set off and retrieve Maebe under orders from the king. Everybody aboard had offered condolences or appeared to be going about their work in a melancholic state. Yet she could not shake the feeling that when they docked, her father would be waiting on the shore, his disapproving face mouthing the words, "You must learn your duty." A cruel punishment for her going to Clest, but at least he would be alive. Locked away in her cabin, Maebe swung between disbelief and crying until her eyes were red. On the rare occasions when she was on the deck, she pivoted between despondent silence, sore eyes staring forward into the blue distance, or snapping at the sailors carrying her home. Home, where her father's cold corpse lay. Spaceth Manor, flustered with panicked servants who had dealt with the visitors and mourners as best they could. Certainly had hidden away with a guard on the door, preventing uninvited guests from seeing her. Word of a murderer entering the home of the Red Seal Navarch was the gossip of Elpis. People even crowded the docks by the Sylph's Tale when Maebe disembarked. She had been informed that the head guard and 2 others who were on duty when the murder took place were currently in the palace dungeons awaiting a brutal trial. The king had reacted with fury upon hearing the news. Cold had seeped into the roots of her home. Everything had the chill shadow of death hovering over it. Every item held a memory of what she had, what she would never have again. The whole manor was now hers to maintain. The fleet, crew, servants, incomings and outgoings, the responsibility. Certainly appeared on the stairs the moment the carriage pulled up to the front. Wherever she had been hiding had a view of the entrance gate, it seemed. She descended the last flight of steps to the first floor and attempted to embrace Maebe as she walked through the aged oak front. Maebe tossed her cloak at her, as if she were a servant or a wooden stand. Instead of acknowledging certainly, who now looked defeated by Maebe's instant callousness, she called to Jorgen, in a voice as cold as morning frost. She wished to be taken to her father this second. She needed to see his lifeless body, to believe the world could crash down around her with such indifference. Maebe's lip quivered as they walked past his ground floor office. The sturdy door was left open. The unlit fireplace and tidy desk killed the small, childish hope that he would be sat at work. A frown creased her brow as they passed his personal chambers and walked towards a guest room that had been shut off for years. It had been open when her mother was alive, when they held vibrant dances and meals. The 2 downstairs guest rooms were saved for the least welcome of the company they invited. Only after her father twisted his legs had the lavender suite been converted into his chambers. She stood at the door. Jorgen waited patiently for his mistress to indicate that she was ready to enter. "Why is he in the Navy suite?" She spat after a moment's delay by the closed door. The wooden panels pulsed with the significance of what laid beyond them. Before Jorgen could respond, a small voice twittered behind her, sending a raw ripple of annoyance along her spine. "We had a lot of visitors, May, and then they were so used to going into your father's office, so I saw a few of the important ones in there. Captain Hill came twice, and even Princess Morgana visited. Most wanted to speak to you, or ask questions that I didn't want to answer until you were back," certainly stammered from behind her. She was stood a few paces back, with her eyes dropped to the floor, as if she was taking in the details of the tiles, thumbs twisting around one another. Maebe spun on her. "But why would you not keep him in his office, near everything he loved, with his portrait of mother, with his life's work? You thought stuffing him into an empty room far away would be best. You could have used the drawing room for those meetings." She needed the anger. It stomped on the fear of entering through those 2 thin doors. "Forgive me, Miss Sumine. I suggested this room, as it has easy access but is quiet enough for a peaceful morning. I assumed you'd need to use the office when you arrived, and would have preferred it to not be occupied. And the drawing room was where we found him," Jorgen interjected, across Maebe's fury. She twisted back to meet her servant's eyes. A man who had worked for her family since before she was born. A wave of nausea washed over her, and she trembled as she understood what he meant. She took a moment to compose herself, and turned back to face the smooth wooden panels between her and misery. "Well, open up then, let's be about it." Her tone was clipped. Jorgen pushed the doors inwards, standing just inside with his hands still resting on the handle until Maebe stepped fully into the room. The chamber was dark due to the huge windows being covered with the heavy night blue drapes pulled over tight. The light of the beautiful day outside pushed against the silk barrier, but only succeeded in casting a cracked glow on the ceiling and floor. Maebe's breath snagged. Her lungs shriveled and deflated as she saw the dark wooden box in the center of the room. Flowers on 2 tables on either side, heavy with scents that would mask the smell of death. Useless crystals emanated magic designed to preserve the hollow body between them. Jorgen vanished back through the door, mercifully remaining silent when he noticed the heavy tears that flooded down his mistress's cheeks. Maebe straightened her spine and lifted her chin against a mind heavy with guilt. Only 1 week ago they had argued in his office, and she had lashed out at him like a wild viper. "May?" That timid voice behind her spoke, just a choked whisper. She was unaware that Certainly would be foolish enough to intrude on this moment. She heard as Certainly's slipper brushed the floor as she took a step further inside, invading Maebe's grief. "Get out?" Maebe whispered, hot tears stinging her eyes. "If you need—" "I said get out!" Maebe screamed at Certainly, making her cower. "How dare you be here? You do not belong here. Get out!" Her hands clumsily grasped the nearest vase of flowers, and she hurled it to the floor near Certainly's feet. Certainly scurried out of the room like a scolded dog. Maebe focused on her breathing. In, out. In, out. Minutes passed until she gathered enough focus to creep closer to the dark wooden box. Taking in the glinting crystals at the top and bottom of the casket, She shuddered at the comparison to the preserved meals laid out for her in Clest. Each step made her body weigh more, until she grasped the edge of the wood. Peering inside, she fixed onto the details of his face. The grey hue of his skin, the grazes along his jaw and eyebrow, evidence of the struggle he faced. His clean clothes that hid the damage that had been done underneath. On the journey across Moonay Gulf, Captain Hark had taken Maebe into her tiny cabin and given her a few of the details about her father's murder that they knew. He had been killed on the night after she had left. There had been sounds of fighting downstairs which had woken one of the maids. She hurried to get help from one of the ground guards by yelling out of a window. But when they arrived, her father had been face down on the floor. He had been ripped from his chair and slumped in an awkward pile of limbs, multiple knife wounds around his torso, bleeding onto the carpet like a crimson shadow. Lady Taru was unharmed during the attack, although she did get into the room before anyone thought to stop her and fainted at the sight, the captain informed Maebe, even though she hadn't asked. She thought the anger would evaporate from her when she looked into the coffin. She expected the bruised, bloated face of her father to fill her with an unquenching sorrow, but it just fueled the fire that had been lit at Certainly's intrusion. I only went away for a little bit, not forever. I was going to come home. You left me, she murmured through the burning tears, sliding from her cheeks down onto his waistcoat. How could you leave me? She yelled at his unresponding body, smacking her hand into the wood. The pain jarred through her knuckles, and she cradled it to her chest, falling to her knees with her forehead resting on the side of his casket. She cried louder than she thought possible. Anger, guilt, and sorrow blended into a flawless mixture of heartache. Maebe was alone in the tomb of her home. The evidence of her father's struggles had been magnified through a trick of her tears and etched into her last memory of his face. The Crystal Charter, daughter of the Red Sea.